Jamie here with Him Motorsports, representing Pirelli on the Pro Paddock in Nashville, Tennessee for round 14 of the SMX season. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk you through how we change tires here on the Pro Paddock. Hopefully you'll learn a thing or two to be able to take back to your shop and be able to get these things changed without popping tubes and to be able to do it in a nice quick manner. Before I get started, I do know for everyone out there that there are a million ways to change tires. I get it, I understand, but this is the way that we do it. It's the most proficient for us, and we're able to bang out anywhere between 12 to 15 tires within a couple hours. So before I get started, I'm going to go through the equipment that we're going to be using, because when it comes down to tire changes, equipment is going to be everything. If you don't have the right equipment, you're going to be sitting there struggling with it. I've been there on a tailgate with a screwdriver. After getting the right tools, we're able to get this tire knocked out about anywhere between 7 to 15 minutes, depending on how big of a struggle it is. All right, before we get started on everything, I'm going to go through all the different tools that we're going to be using today, and this is what's going to help you out the most when it comes to changing these tires. So starting off with the tire stand here, it's a basic tire, it's a basic grate on the bottom with a 1-inch square tubing up to a long post to be able to hold that tire in place. Some people have the big tire stands. That's perfectly fine. Those work great as well. But this is what we use in the Pirelli Pro pits. Coming over here, starting off, we got our good tire paste. This will help lube up that bead to be able to get it over the rim really well. A set of really good spoons. We use a digital gauge for our air pressure. Bead buddies are a must. It's going to help you make sure that tire doesn't come walking off on you. Along with our torque wrenches and our valve core torque wrench. A lot of people, they put in the valve core, they'll over tighten it with one of these. A good valve core torque wrench or a torque will be able to help you out so you don't blow up that valve core. Assortment of wrenches. Typically each wheel is going to use the same wrench size, but also each wheel is a little bit different. So I always keep a 14 through a 10. Same thing with same thing right here with our standard sockets. For rim tape, we don't use the rim bands. We use Gorilla Tape. It works better and it lasts a lot longer. Baby powder, right, to help keep the tube nice and soft in there and allow it to spin a little bit. We're going to use contact cleaner at some point in order to put these stickers on. This rider's getting stickers, so we're also going to use this to kind of clip off those little pieces. This tool right here I really enjoy using for those really hard to get areas whenever you're trying to put in the valve stem into the rim. So you might see me use this. If not, I'll demonstrate how it's used. And a good air gun. So you have different options with these. You know, a lot of people will use just a standard air chuck. I like to use one of these because it helps me see the air pressure that I'm putting into the wheel. And you know, you always want to make sure that you don't over pressurize the tube, but have enough pressure to be able to set the bead. We'll go over that here in a minute. All right, so today what we got an old Dunlop coming off this wheel. The rider wants to make a change. He likes the way our tires feel, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna get it set up. Coming off this Dunlop MX33. All right. He requested that we find something similar to the 33, so we recommended, and we recommend for some of our riders. If you're coming off a Dunlop and you're a long-time Dunlop rider, try starting off with the MX32 Mid Hard. That MX32 Mid Hard is a little bit closer to that Dunlop feel, but you're gonna get a lot of extra grip with these big knobs on the side. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take this tire off the wheel. And again, I'm gonna show you how we do it here in the pit. So first things first, we're gonna get that valve core out of the wheel. He has one of these rubber boots set up on his valve stem. So typically you would have a nut. Some people are special. They like to have that a little bit extra, a little rubber boot to help keep everything down. So we're just gonna go ahead, we're gonna get that rubber boot off. That's gonna help us later on. It's gonna help us get the wheel off as we kind of go through this process. So I'm gonna take that valve core remover, put it in there, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. I'm gonna take that valve core out. What that's gonna do is it's gonna allow me to be able to work well with this wheel, having all the air out. All right, so if you really wanna help your riders out, a lot of these tubes are gonna come with these black banded valve cores. What we like to do here at Pirelli is we set them up with more of a high pressure valve core. Lasts a lot longer, a little bit more heavy duty. So we'll go ahead and put that one off to the side, and it's cool. Once we get the valve core out, you know all the air is out, we're gonna start loosening up that bead lock. So I'm gonna go ahead, this one's a 12, I'm gonna go ahead and loosen that. Pretty much all the way up. I'm not gonna take the nut off, we don't wanna lose it, we don't wanna lose the washer, but we wanna loosen it up all the way in order to be able to get this wheel off here and back on with no issues. So once I get that nut loose, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and insert my spoon this way, right inside that bead, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna push down, breaking the bead on that side. A lot of times, once you get one side of the bead down, you can just go ahead and press down on the tire, and the rest of the bead is gonna follow. After I do that, the bead's all off on one side. You can either flip the tire over, pull the bead on the other side, or just work from one side at a time. I like to work from one side at a time. Once I get it to this point, I'm gonna take my spoon this way, and I'm gonna put it inside and underneath that bead. You'll be able to feel it once you get the spoon in by running from on top of the wheel and then going up, sliding that spoon, the side of the spoon, up and underneath the bead. You'll be about that far in, and you'll feel it catch, right? I like to use 3 spoons. This helps out the process a little bit better, and I'll go a couple inches apart. Since our back is stronger than our chest, what we're gonna do now, put those spoons on the opposite side, we're gonna grab the first one and the second one, and we're gonna start pulling, trying to get that bead up and over the wheel, and locking it right underneath that brake rotor. Once we got the first one up, then we'll take the second one, followed by the third one. You'll see that second spoon comes out pretty easy. So you're gonna take that one out, and then you're gonna start working it around the rest of the wheel. In the beginning, try to start off with like a couple inch bites, maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on how well you can get in the tire. If you gotta get it less, get it less. See, I had to come in a little bit closer, but I felt that spoon hook, and then I'm just gonna push it right up and over. And I'm gonna do the same thing all the way around the tire. Try to avoid putting any spoons next to the valve stem, because that's where you're gonna have a lot of your problems, ripping valve stems away from tube. So again, try to skip over that valve stem as best you can, be able to get that light up and over. Notice how I left that first spoon in? What that's gonna do is almost allow you to set it like a bead lock, but it prevents the bead from trying to walk back in. Now once I'm at this point, right around that bead locker, I'm just gonna pull that tire up, and that's gonna bring the bead of the wheel, or bead of the tire, up and over the wheel. Now on to the other side. Again, I like to start right by the bead lock. I'll put that first spoon in. I'm gonna break that bead down. Now as soon as that bead broke, now the whole tire is loose, and I'm just gonna walk. All right, so now that we got both beads up and over the wheel, we have the wheel currently inside the actual tire. We're gonna go ahead and get the tire off. There's a couple different ways to do it. The way that we prefer here is we'll go from the bead lock side and pull the tire directly back to us. As you can see, it's gonna leave a nice open gap right here for us to be able to grab hold, push the tire down, and push it away. When you have a wheel that the valve stem is on the opposite side of the bead lock, be mindful of that when you're pulling the tire away so as not to rip off the valve stem. Good, we got it out. Now we just pull that tire away. So first thing we want to do is we want to inspect the band on the inside. This rider has a lot of dirt built up. So I'm just going to get a brush right here. I'm going to brush away all that dirt that's inside that wheel. But while you're cleaning it, it gives you a good opportunity to sit there, reset the rim band. If anything came off, inspect the whole rim band, and allows you to be able to get a good visual of the entire wheel to better support your rider. Alright, now that we got the wheel off, the tire off the wheel, we're going to go ahead and start setting up the new wheel for installation. First thing to do is I'm going to take the old tube out, so the old wheel, I'm going to throw that off to the side. We don't need that shenanigans around us. I'm going to take my valve core, I'll put it back into the tube. I'm going to use my valve core torque wrench, get it all the way in, a couple clicks, and we're all good to go. Take my air chuck, I'm going to fill this thing with air until it forms. Not too much, just enough to get it to form. This thing's pretty dirty. I'm going to go ahead and wipe it off. Get some of that clay dust off of there. Now we're good to go. This tube's ready to be mounted. I'm going to grab the tire that we're going to be using. Again, this is the 110/90/19. MX32 mid hard. Real good for harder pack. Really good for harder pack. Dirt, rocks, trail riding, things of that nature. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my baby powder, give it a couple little squirts in here. What I want to do is I want to have this whole wheel on the inside lined with baby powder. What that's going to do is it's going to help prevent moisture buildup. It's going to allow your tube to slide so it's not getting stuck on the inside of the rubber, causing damage to your tube. And it also makes it smell real nice if you get a good baby powder. So now that I got everything in there, I got the baby powder, I'm going to stuff the tube into the wheel. Alright, once I have that tube inside the wheel, I'm gonna make sure I lube up this side of that bead. So I'm gonna get a good amount of soap here, amount of paste, and I'm gonna go ahead and lube that bead up real good. Alright, lube is your friend. Too much lube never hurt anybody. Okay, so now that we got that all set, we're gonna flip this tire over. And we're gonna line up the valve stem. So, we're on here. And you can see right now where I have it lined up. I have the valve stem lined up with the valve stem hole. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start mounting this tire. So we're gonna mount it starting off with the bead first. All right, if the valve stem was on this side, we would install the valve first, but because the valve's on the opposite side, we're gonna start off with the bead. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with the tire, pressing into the bead lock. So I'm gonna use that bead lock to help kind of hold this tire in place. I'll press that bead lock all the way out, and I'm gonna slide that tire under the bead lock, allowing me to get that bead fully underneath that bead lock. From there, I can start walking the tire around. Again, you can use 1 spoon, 2 spoons, it doesn't matter, whatever you're comfortable with. So I'm gonna take first one, I'm gonna use a big bite in order to get this thing started. And then I'm gonna start taking smaller bites as I'm going around, making sure that I get this entire bead up and over the wheel. It's a good way to do it, especially if your customers like the way that their wheels look. So you don't have to worry about damaging them. Always take little bites, help prevent that. This last little bit's always a little bit tricky. So with 2 spoons, I would already have one in there. Since I'm using one, I'm just gonna lift up on the bottom. I'm gonna slide that spoon in, and then up and over. I know no one likes hearing that sound, but it's fine, it's okay. Next thing I need to do is I need to make sure that my valve stem didn't move. In this case, it did a little bit. So I'm just gonna grab a hold of a couple spokes. I'm gonna turn that wheel until that valve stem is right where I need it to be. So when it comes to these types of wheels, in order to get that in, what we do is the following, right? So I'm gonna show you exactly how we set it up, get it ready, and get this valve stem right into that hole. So first thing, I'm gonna add more air to the tire or the tube in order to get it really wanting to push forward. Now you can see that valve stem has a little bit of pressure behind it. It wants to push forward. It wants to kind of, when it's like that, it's gonna help you, right? I might add a little bit too much air, so I'm gonna take a little bit out of there. That's perfectly fine. But we wanna make sure there's some push to that valve stem. So when we go ahead and do this next part, that valve stem will just try to walk itself right into it. So if I take 1 spoon, about 1 spoke away, or 2 spokes away on each side, and I'm gonna pull this tire back, right? What that's gonna do is it's gonna allow me to open up underneath inside here. Sometimes you might need 3, that's okay. Use that side of the spoon if you're having to come in here to work the valve. But make sure that whenever you're doing this, see how I have that pressed up against there? Make sure there's no All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna push the wheel down. As you can see inside here, look right here. I'll go inside here. You'll be able to see you can see the hole from the inside, right there. So now we're gonna do with this 3rd spoon. We're just gonna work that valve stem right into that hole. All right, so once we get that in, as you can see, valve stem came poking out right through that hole because all that extra air we pushed in. Luckily, we don't need the other tool. I'm gonna show you how to use that tool anyways, just in case it doesn't work out that way. So if you're forced to use this tool, the way it works is you would take this little end, get it underneath the bead here, and then get between the knobs and just kind of lift up slightly. What that's gonna do is gonna give you room inside here. Put your fingers in and push that valve stem out a little bit more. Key note with this, don't wrench it all the way back, you will destroy the bead. So now we got that valve stem poked through, we want to make sure that it's nice and straight. So we're going to go ahead and grab a hold of a spoke, we're going to pull the tire a little bit, just kind of give it a little jerk. Alright, now that we got that thing straightened up, we're going to go ahead and start working our way around the bead. So what I like to do, first off, you want to make sure we grease it up. Get that good grease, get that good lube going. And grab our bead buddy. So what I do is I count 4 spokes behind the bead lock. And that's where my starting point is going to be. What that's going to do is allow me to get up and over the bead lock with little resistance and help use that bead lock as a secondary bead buddy. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that spoon in. I'm gonna make sure I'm not grabbing a hold of any tube. I'm gonna push it down, and I'm gonna slide that bead buddy right over, in, and around one of these spokes. Next step, I'm gonna go over this bead lock. I'm gonna make sure I get this thing pressed all the way in. Get my spoon set, press that bead lock all the way in, and I'm gonna bring that bead up and over the wheel, allowing it to get underneath the bead lock. I go clockwise around the wheel. Some people go counterclockwise. Again, user discretion. So I'm gonna use my forearm here to hold down this spoon, and I'll put in that second spoon. I'm gonna start off with bigger bites, about 4 to 6 inches. And then as I work my way around the wheel, I'm gonna start getting a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller. Until I start getting towards the end, when I'm gonna make really small bites. So once you start feeling it get really tight, first thing I wanna check is I'm gonna check the opposite side of the wheel. Is the bead up and over kind of set? If it is, I wanna get it out of the way. So I'm gonna take the other side of the wheel, and I'm gonna push it down so that the bead is in that drop center zone. What that's gonna do is that's gonna allow me a little bit more breathing room over here on this side of the tire. So again, I'm gonna take little bites. I'm gonna get it up and over. Once I start seeing it get really tight, I'm gonna go ahead and start dropping multiple spoons underneath the bead, so I don't have to try and fight it later. So I'll get spoon 1, slide this back over here, get it closer, so I get those little bites. Spoon 1, spoon 2, and I'm gonna take spoon 1 out, and I'm gonna set it here at the end as my last spoon. I'm gonna pull spoon 3, and now spoon 4. Now the bead is set. All right, so now that we got the tire all the way on, we need to get this thing prepped and ready for the track. So first things first, obviously I want to take out that bead buddy. We don't want to try and set a bead with that in there. Next thing, I'm gonna go ahead and add air. So what I like to do, and it seems to work out really well, is I like to put about 30 PSI air inside these tubes. What that does is it's gonna press that tire all the way against the bead, get it to pop out really well. You should be able to hear the pop here. There's one pop, there's a second pop. So I got about 30 PSI in there. And like I said, what that does for me is that helps me set the bead, helps me get this thing prepped and ready to go. All right, so after I put air, I'm gonna go ahead and check the entire bead on both sides of the tire. Make sure that that line, that lip is all the way through. For instance, like this. So if you come here, you'll see this is a good bead set, but we come all the way around here, we don't want this right here. So what I gotta do is I gotta add more air to this tire. When I add more air to this tire, we should be able to watch this bead go ahead and walk on up. You can see it kind of going. We don't want to go more than 60 PSI, but we're at 55. And there. See, now we got a good bead all the way around. I got a lot of air in this tire right now. So since all the bead's set, I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna bring some of that air out of there, just because I don't want the tube to get too stretched. I don't want the bead to get too stretched. So I'm not looking at pressure right now. I'm just trying to get some of that air out of there. But now that we got a good bead all the way around, like I said, this tire, this rider is set to get some tire stickers. So I'm gonna show you how we do that. got the tire sticker on, first thing you want to do to get the tire really prepped, we're going to set the air pressure. Pirelli tires are a lot softer compound on the sidewall and on the knobs, so we always recommend starting off at 14 psi, and then from there, go ahead and adjust it for rider comfort. If we had to use a lot of air to set the bead, it's going to take a minute, but we'll get down close to where we want to be. A lot of air in the tire. Alright, so right now I got about 14.1. That's okay because I'm not doing the final pressure check yet. I want to get it as close as I can when I set this bead lock. What a lot of people will do is they'll set the bead lock while the tube is fully inflated to bead setting inflation. What that does is it puts a lot of pressure on that bead whenever it does deflate down to proper pressure, and it can cause ruptures of the bead. So we set it as close as we can to the normal pressure before we actually start tightening down the bead locker, to be able to allow it to set the bead to set properly before torquing it down. So we use 14 foot-pounds or 168 inch-pounds, depending on which torque wrench you're using. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to torque this down to 14 foot-pounds or 168 inch-pounds. So as you can see, I hit my torque, and now the bead lock is set. Now I'm going to go back in, I'm going to do my final pressure check. Sometimes, as you can see, the pressure went up after setting the bead. Bring that back down to 14. Really watch these gauges, sometimes they'll jump back up, but 14 psi, this tire's ready to go. Alright, now that we're done with the rear, we're going to move on to the front. This time, I'm just going to work, and I'm going to let you kind of follow along.